Hello there, welcome to the Raphterra channel. My name is Raph and I aim to provide the best Legends of Runeterra content on the internet. I am a master rank player who has played in the professional level of LOR. I've competed in several seasonal tournaments and participated in the qualifiers for the 2021 World Championship. Today, I'm bringing to you my full guide on Lux Heimer Turret Control, the deck that I used to climb on my NA Smurf account from Diamond 3 to Diamond 1 ATLP at 65% win rate. After watching this video and with the right amount of practice, I'm confident that you will be able to reach Masters with this deck. Here is the deck list I used. I will also put the deck code in the description of this video. Heimer Lux is a control deck that aims to outvalue opposing decks by casting spells with Lux or Heimerdinger on board. Lux outvalues by generating Final Spark and removing units for free.
Better, brighter than before. A beacon through the dark. No regrets.
Heimerdinger outvalues by generating turrets and getting free bodies on board.
It's an awesome day for progress.
They said it couldn't be done.
With the release of patch 3.6, Lux and Heimer are now very strong champions due to the rule change of the cast/play mechanic. Previously, you would need to wait for spells to resolve before you can generate cards with Lux and Heimer. However, with the rule change, you can now generate cards instantly from these champions right after putting the spells on the stack. It wouldn't matter if the spells are denied or if the champions are removed, you still get value out of them. Lux now instantly levels up and generates a Final Spark if you cast a spell that costs 6 or more. In this deck, the spells that you can use to level up Lux in one cast are Thermogenic Beam, Production Surge, Assembly Line, and Shock Blast. These 6-cost spells are also great with Heimerdinger, as these spells generate the strongest of Heimer's turrets, MK6 Floorby Gun with the elusive keyword. Flash of Brilliance is another spell that synergizes very well with our champions. This spell counts as a 3-cost spell cast, it refills your spell mana right after casting, and it also generates a 6-cost spell which you can use right after. Since this deck plays lots of spells that cost 6 or more, we are running support cards like Forge Chief and the Forge of Tomorrow for early tempo, Ferros Financier for card generation, and Hextech Handler to buff up Heimerdinger's turrets. Finally, the deck also runs utility spells like Mystic Shot for removal, Sharp Sight for protection and for dealing with elusives, Time Trick to help you find your champions in the mid-game, and Concerted Strike as a fast speed removal. Now that you have a good idea of the deck build, let's go into how to actually play Lux Heimer. Each game starts with the Mulligan. Generally, you want to have one copy of either Lux or Heimerdinger in your starting hand, but never keep both together. The exception to this is if you are up against aggro decks where you need to hard mulligan for early plays like Forge Chief, Ferros Financier, Thermogenic Beam, and Mystic Shot. Against mid-range, combo, or control decks, you want to keep pressure cards like Forge Chief, Forge of Tomorrow, Assembly Line, as well as removal spells like Thermogenic Beam and Shock Blast. Mystic Shot is another removal card that you can keep if the opposing deck has key units with 2 health like Leblanc or Draven. After the mulligan, games usually go in the following pattern. In the early turns, you want to play early units for tempo and use removal spells if needed. You don't need to be aggressive in the early phases. You almost want to stall out until the mid-game where you can start playing around your champions. On turn 5, you play either Lux or Heimerdinger. This will be a big tempo loss since both champions have poor stats. But this tempo loss will be compensated in later turns if you can stick them on board. Once you have a champion on board, you will start the outvalue/outgrind game plan by generating removals or units for each spell you cast.
Unforeseen outcome. Answers, I have them.
You can close the game out when it reaches the point where your opponent will run out of units to play and just get overwhelmed by your tempo.
Calculated.
Now that you know how to mulligan and how the games with the deck go, let's go into some general tips. If you are up against decks with removal, you want to find a safe spot to play your champions. Lux is easier to protect since she already has Barrier when she is played. Heimerdinger on the other hand is a lot easier to remove because he only has 4 health. When playing Heimer, you want to have mana backup to cast Flash of Brilliance or other low cost spells so that you can still get value out of Heimerdinger even if he is removed immediately. If needed in the early game, do not hesitate to use 6 cost spells even if you don't have champions on board yet. It may be tempting to wait until turn 6 onwards to use your big spells, but most of the time you will draw into more 6 cost spells anyway as you approach the mid to late game. Be efficient when using low cost spells with Lux. The most common combination of low cost spells that you can use to generate Final Spark is Flash of Brilliance into Lux's Prismatic Barrier. You can also use other combinations like Time Trick plus Mystic Shot plus Flash of Brilliance or Time Trick plus Concerted Strike. As much as possible, use Production Surge only if you already have Hex Tech Handler activated. An activated Hex Tech Handler will significantly increase the tempo that you can gain from playing Production Surge. Lux Heimer does very well into many popular decks in the new patch. The deck is super favored against most board-centric decks like Elites or Scouts. It also outvalues other tempo decks like Ezreal Caitlyn and Ferros Control. Against control decks, Lux Heimer has the ability to pressure with the whiteboard through Heimerdinger while removing key units with Lux. If you have both champions on board, it's very possible to beat even Mono Shurima with a flipped Sundisk. However, due to having no healing, this deck can struggle against aggressive burn decks like Pirate Aggro or Spider Aggro. Before we go into the sample games, make sure to join my Discord channel so that you will have access to the matchup analysis and tips that I will not be able to cover in this video. Link will be in the description below. The first sample game in this video is against a re-emerging mid-range deck, Ashe Leblanc Frostbite. Against mid-range decks, you want to mulligan for champions and removal for their key units. In this game, I kept one copy of Mystic Shot in preparation for Leblanc, but I threw away the other copy since I want to look for harder removal like Thermogenic Beam or Shock Blast. The game plan against board-centric decks is to remove their units efficiently with your spells. Decks like Ashe Noxus, Elites, and Scouts have no way to win if you can remove their key units. In this game, I have lots of removals in hand. I should be in a good spot if I can manage my mana well. For this matchup, the key units are Ashe, Leblanc, and possibly Legion Marauders. My opponent plays 2 Omen Hawks consecutively, which can be scary since this might put his units out of range of my removals. Leblanc with a 7 stat 4 is very threatening. This Leblanc cannot be allowed to survive. I used a 6 mana Thermo Beam in order to play around Elixir of Iron. Before turn 5, do not be afraid to open pass if the opposing board is not that threatening. I always make sure that I have enough mana for removal each turn.
Come on, people, let's make tomorrow today.
My opponent plays Strength in Numbers, giving me the opportunity to use the easiest Shock Blast of my life. It's a little bit annoying since I don't have my champions yet. Luckily, I have Time Trick to search for them. I start the turn with a low commitment play with Forge Chief to see what my opponent does. I finally find Heimerdinger with Time Trick, but I'm not optimistic that he can last on board because my opponent might be running Culling Strike. Once my opponent plays Whispered Words, I thought I could play Heimerdinger safely, but my opponent had a mega buffed Trifarian Glory Seeker.
Sharpen the blade, secure the kill.
Before my Heimerdinger is removed, I tried to get value out of him by using Mystic Shot. This is slightly annoying, but I still have my hard removals in hand. I can still stall out until I get another champion.
Patience.
Come on, people. Let's make tomorrow today. Shift change.
Places to go, people to be.
Shock Blast is a real MVP in this matchup. The card kills most units in the opposing deck.
I will unite the Freljord.
Yes, my lord.
These are our lands!
Watch out!
In this spot, I play my second Heimerdinger in preparation before casting Shock Blast. My opponent plays Strength in Numbers. I choose to remove Ashe and one of the Legion Marauders in order to prevent them from snowballing.
Unify the tribes!
A true Freljordian welcome.
My most groundbreaking invention to date!
Come on, boys.
Here, I do not get greedy with my elusive turret and I just trade it off with the Legion Marauder. As long as I keep my Heimerdinger alive, I'll be able to summon more turrets later on anyway. True Shot Barrage is a fantastic card to manifest in this spot. This is the perfect removal for my opponent's board. The Barrier Turret might be one of the worst turrets in the game, but we will get it for free anyway, so I'm not complaining.
Anyone hurt?
Unbreakable as everything can use an upgrade!
Grace! Look what I found. Plenty for all of us. Nice lucky to have me, in my opinion. First let the blood, then stop the heart.
After the long out grind, my opponent eventually runs out of units to play and he surrenders.
Calculated!
Hey, if you like the content so far and you want to support me, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want more videos like this. The next game that we will go into is against a strong deck that I featured in my previous guide, Jayce Ferros Control. Against control decks, you want to keep champions, units that can pressure, and removals for key units. In this game, I kept Heimerdinger and Vanguard Sergeant to have early board presence. Getting Assembly Line is great since this card will allow me to gain early tempo.
Come closer. I don't bite. You won't suffer long.
On turn 3, I went ahead and played Assembly Line in order to immediately deal with my opponent's fearsome units.
sends her blessing. Punch it out.
Shut up when I can.
All right, Nugget. What you got for me?
Activating Hextech Handler early is great since I have Heimerdinger in hand. On turn 5, I started with the open attack since it's dangerous to play champions when my opponent has 8 mana. I also want to represent removal to make my opponent hesitate from playing Jayce. After my opponent goes down to 2 mana, I played Lux to start the value game plan. The next turn, my opponent was able to remove Lux unfortunately. I could play Heimerdinger here but I opted to play some other units first to keep up in tempo. Once again, similar to a few turns earlier, I started with an open attack to see what my opponent would do first. After my opponent commits mana, this is now a safe spot to play Heimerdinger. I'm not exactly sure why I played Mystic Shot on Albus Ferros here. I could have saved it for a better use later on. Albus Ferros can be easily removed with Concerted Strike or Thermogenic Beam anyway.
It's smaller than the diagram.
We look ahead. I protect my own.
Also design enables rapid projectile firing.
This is the cutting edge of progress.
Hey, big man. You ready to get...
My opponent finally decides to play his Jayce, but this is a perfect spot for me to use a 5 mana Thermogenic Beam.
Full blast!
Can a spirit fight to the death? Thinking I'll learn.
Launches at record for progress!
My opponent also uses Thermogenic Beam on my champion, but this is fine since we already got a lot of value out of Heimerdinger. I'm now starting to outgrind and outvalue my opponent with my turrets. I just need to make sure that I always represent removal for Jayce or Albus Ferros.
I help when I can. Shut up when I can.
Look, a thing. Elle, that's not ours.
It's an awesome day for progress.
This is another game where True Shot Barrage is the perfect removal to get from Ferros Financier.
Punch it out.
Moving.
Everywhere I go.
With Lux finally on board together with turrets, it's just a matter of time before my opponent gets outgrinded hard.
There's nothing a little ingenuity can't fix.
my opponent plays Jayce and walks directly into another 5 mana thermogenic beam. Desperately, my opponent tries to remove Lux at fast speed, but Concerted Strike will keep Lux safe. The strategy when playing this deck is very similar for most matchups. Stall in the early game, set up your champions in the mid game, outgrind and outvalue, and always represent hard removal for key units.
The superior tactic is to never give up.
For the final game, we will go into an epic showdown against the boss deck of the previous patch, Mono Shurima. Against Mono Shurima, you want to keep champions and pressure units. For this game specifically, I kept Lux and Vanguard Sergeant. The important thing in this matchup is to set up your champions safely in the mid game. If you can stick them on board, chances are you can outvalue even a flipped Sundisk. My opponent has an endless devout, which I will delay killing if possible in order to stall Serath's level up. I want to make sure that I get rid of all the Roiling Sands before I play my champions.
Gonna catch the sky. Can't steer.
With no Roiling Sands active, I safely play Heimerdinger.
Sun's beneath me and wind's behind me. I go! Oh dear!
We can do
The next turn, I also set up my Lux. I don't mind Lux being vulnerable because she is a lot tankier and I can protect her with prismatic barriers. With both of my champion engines now on board, the outvalue game plan begins. In the next turn, I do not want to use 4 Demacia yet, so I opted to use Time Trick plus Prismatic Barrier as my combo for flipping Lux. For every spell I casted, I also generated turrets for tempo.
It's smaller than the diagram. A sturdy construction.
Gently, gently.
This is another spot where I do not know what I was thinking. I casted Prismatic Barrier on the Heimerdinger when I should have casted it on a unit that I planned to attack with. I cannot attack with Heimerdinger because of the threat of Quicksand.
no more holding back.
First relic. Can't steer.
Tell the people what you have seen today.
to do for now.
In preparation for the Sundisk flip, I fill my board with fodder for Serath's skill. I went for the Flash of Brilliance into Prismatic Barrier to generate a final spark, leaving me with enough mana for Thermogenic Beam, which will generate yet another final spark.
Yes, yes, progress! Progress.
The order is given.
Shuriman gods don't seem that scary anymore in the face of technology and magic.
Round and round it goes!
Back to the sands.
God Emperor, your will is ours to obey.
As with all Shurima.
This game reflects the value that you can get if you can stick both Lux and Heimer on board. Even the strongest late game decks will get outvalued with this combination. With my removals and my turrets, I close off the game.
Calculated!
I usually end by talking about how to tweak the deck depending on what you're facing, but I believe this version is already optimized to include all the combo pieces needed if you want to play Heimerdinger and Lux together. It's very possible that both Lux and Heimerdinger might be better when played with other champions, but my games proved that they synergize well enough with each other to form a deck that is strong enough to reach Masters. If you loved this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member. I hope that you're having a nice day. Good luck climbing. Bye-bye.